So today we're going to move to the second module. We're going to start talking about consumer credit. Oh, hey, Michael. I don't think this part is connected.
No, it's not.
So today we're going to talk about credit, which is our second module. From there, we're going to go to insurance and then round it up with retirement. That's our plan between now and the end of the semester. So, credit is credit can be said that credit has been responsible, one of the main factors responsible for moving people from the medieval times to the modern age. And why do I say that? So if you think back in the old times, like in the 14th, 15th centuries and so on, or even before that, vertical movement of people societally was pretty much impossible. Not pretty much, it was impossible. So when you were born in a certain station of life, you pretty much, I keep saying pretty much, and I should not say pretty much. Okay, you lived and died in the same exact status. Nothing changed. There was no way to move up. You could move down. You could become further poor and move down. Certainly no way to move up. And that was because people who were rich, they had the power. And if you had the power, if you were born into that kind of a power structure, you stayed in that power structure and your situation improved. Or if you were born in ordinary circumstances, you stayed there. There was very little vertical movement up or down the chain, societal ladder. And the reason was there was no credit. There was no way to change your position once you were born in a certain station in life. Credit as we know it was almost unknown. There were banks that were lending money, but they were lending money to each other, to the rich people, to the kings and the noble families to finance their wars. So if you look at the banking industry in the 15th and 16th centuries, they were primarily lending money to finance wars in various parts of Europe, to do all the, basically to service the upper class. So as an ordinary person, your chances of getting money, having access to affordable money. Now you had access as ordinary people had access to Shylocks, to loan sharks, and that was exploitive lending. Okay, so that didn't help matters. In fact, it helped put you further back in debt and made your situation worse. But once the Industrial Revolution came about in the UK and in the British, in England, in the 18th centuries and so on, and banks started lending money to ordinary people at reasonable rates of interest, that's when things started changing. That people, through their hard work, labor, creativity, and so on, could actually have access to money and then use that to grow their business and maybe grow themselves out of poverty, out of modest circumstances, and become better, improve themselves in society. So credit really helped. Once, and when I say credit, it's the reasonable access to credit, cheap credit. In other words, not the Shylocking, not the loan sharking kind, that really changed the course of history and made things much more affordable for ordinary people who may have been born with nothing, but through hard work and all that, made something of themselves. So credit, what does credit do? Credit essentially moves your consumption from the future to the present, gives everybody a shock. A shock meaning it allows you, it temporarily boosts your purchasing power. That's what credit does, right? When you borrow money for a home loan, for example, get money for a mortgage loan, you're getting the bank is fronting you the price of the house. Well, minus 10% or 15%, that's your down payment, that's your part of the deal. The other 85 or 90% of the money comes from the bank. The bank is fronting you that money for you to afford the house now. Of course, the alternative is that you could save for years and then save up to buy money, which is what a lot of people have done in the not too distant past. But that, delays the process and all. But what loans do for you is to move up that date, and you make something that normally would be not be affordable today. Now, the main drawback of that also is that there is interest to be paid. So you get the money to buy something, that's all well and good, but the downside of that is you have an obligation now to pay back the money with interest. And that puts a burden on people to do that. Okay, so that's sort of the whole idea of how credit works. Credit is a way for us, or for all of us, to have access to money that normally we wouldn't have in order for us to afford things that we normally wouldn't be able to afford. And that's the idea. So it turns out that credit is really an all-consuming, all-present, omnipresent force. The NFL draft that's going to come up, or the basketball NBA draft, is nothing but an example of credit working in a different way. The draft system where teams will move up and down the drafting board. So somebody's supposed to pick 23rd in the first round can basically go to a team that's picking number 3 or 4 or 5 and take a loan out. The loan can take the form of draft picks. So the cost of borrowing could be 2 future first-round draft choices and money and all that transfers, and then the team is able to move up to that spot to maybe draft a player they want. So that's an example of credit, right? That's an example of credit. So that's going to happen. All the free agency, when your trading's going on in exchange for money and future draft picks, that's an example of credit, especially the future draft picks part of it. So you have some money changing hands and also future draft picks that are changing hands from one team to another. That's an example of credit. So it happens all over the map. We may not realize it. We may not realize that the draft is an example of credit, but it is. So credit can be both good and bad, right? As with most things in life, or anything in life, there's 2 sides to it. So if used responsibly, credit is a great thing because it allows you to have access to certain things and maybe help you grow yourself in certain ways, both personally and professionally and so on. So it can be used, if used correctly and appropriately, it is a good thing. But if you used unwisely, and you can pile up huge debts and then have trouble paying them off, then have to declare bankruptcy and all kinds of problems. So credit can be a good thing if used responsibly, but then it can also really cause a lot of headaches if used unwisely. So again, the credit offering, the credit cards especially, has been, since the mid-90s, credit cards have been this force, indomitable and an ever-present force in our lives. And credit cards are slightly different in the sense that when we talk of, so far when I've talked about loans, bank loans usually come, they're called collateralized loans. So when a bank lends money, usually when it lends money against something. So a mortgage loan that means the house is the collateral. So as I may have mentioned this in a different context, but when a bank lends you money and you have a mortgage loan from a bank, you may think you own the house, but you really don't. The bank owns the house. The bank allows you to stay in the house and in return for monthly payments, which we call mortgage payments. So the bank is nicely allowing us to stay in the house, but it's the bank's property. The bank owns the deed. Okay, the bank owns the title to the house. And so if we mess up on our monthly payments, the bank can foreclose. There's a term called foreclosure, which means the bank will simply call in the loan and say, pay up or get out of the house, and then start eviction proceedings against you. And so, but that means the bank will then reclaim the property and then try to sell it and recover all or most of its money. So these loans that banks make are mostly collateralized loans. That means that the bank's risk in this transaction is limited by the fact that there's an asset against which the money is given out. If you, the borrower, do not hold up your side of the bargain, then the bank simply takes back its property and kicks you out of the property, then proceeds to sell the house, goes on to sell the house or the property and recover its money. So that's one garden variety loan type, which is called collateralized loans, which banks make. And because it's a collateralized loans, the interest rates charged by banks are relatively low. And I say relatively low. But with credit cards, however, it's a different story. Credit cards provide what is called uncollateralized loan. There is no property against which credit card money is written. So when a bank issues you a credit card and gives you a credit line, whatever the amount that is, the bank is extending that amount to you without any collateral or any security in return. The bank has simply done a credit check on you, has determined that you are an acceptable enough risk, and has given you a credit card with a credit line against which to spend, and then you get a monthly bill, and then you pay up, settle or not. We'll talk about that in detail. But that's basically what happens. And so you are allowed to spend with impunity up to that credit limit every month, and then we'll talk about what happens. But it's a convenient way for all of us to spend money, and it has been hugely embraced by us in this country. And it's easy to use. It's flexible. It's safe, relatively speaking. If your account gets hacked into, you'll be simply issued a new credit card, and all charges, unauthorized charges as they're called, made in your account are not your responsibility. So the bank eats the losses. And so, not surprisingly, through credit card losses are run in the tune of trillions of dollars in this country, from people just using, hacking into accounts, using them and running for cover and hiding. Of course, credit card companies have also gotten smarter. You may have realized that or seen texts popping up in your smartphones every time like a charge is made, just to alert you that did you make that charge. If you didn't, you're supposed to call in immediately and stuff like that. Anytime there's they're put in a lot of these internal checks and balances to ensure that. So if you normally live in a particular zip code and suddenly a large enough charge shows up from a different zip code, they're going to immediately flag that and not approve it till they can even hold up that transaction, because they suspect that something could be afoot here and they want confirmation before the bank will allow those charges. So there's a lot of stuff that banks have also done to limit their losses now, but that's a different discussion for another day. But so you have all these advantages using credit cards. Of course, there's rewards in terms of cash back and all kinds of mileage and other perks that you get for using credit cards, which is one way of banks incentivizing you to use their card more. Now, how does it work? When you go to a vendor, say Walmart, and you use your credit card, well, when you swipe your credit card through Walmart's machines, Walmart has to pay. Let's say you have a Visa card, a Citibank Visa card, and you swipe it in Walmart's checkout thing on the checkout lane, then what will happen is for every one of those swipes, Walmart has to pay a percentage of your charge as a fee to Visa. And Visa earns, through the billions of transactions like that, Visa's earning a little bit every time. So merchants have to pay for that stuff. So when you're running for your convenienced, it's your convenience that you're doing it. Walmart is allowing you to do that, but Walmart has to turn around and pay the parent company of the credit card a fee for every such swipe, and that's how the issuing bank or the issuing company, the credit card company, makes money out of it. But of course, on the other side of the ledger, when every time there's a fraud, there's all these charges that people do not pay or just get out of, and that also runs into trillions of dollars overall in the country per year. credit card companies take a lot of hits as well in terms of their losses. So bottom line that I'm trying to say here is that credit cards are risky investments for banks, and therefore the interest rates that they charge for credit card related transactions are significantly higher than, say, bank loans and stuff. So bank loans might be 8, 9, 10% loans. Credit card loans could extend anywhere from 25% to 40% loans because of the risk involved and the fact that they are uncollateralized. So again, I'm going to, let's see, are there any questions? What's the difference between buying with credit on a, buying with credit on a debit card and paying with a credit card? Okay, first of all, a debit card is nothing but a checkbook. It's like an electronic check. So in the past, we used to all write checks, right? And a lot of people still do. They usually are the ones that hold up the line because they're meticulously writing out the checks while you're tapping your foot in impatience. Maybe I'm projecting that myself in that statement, but the point is that there are people who still do that, and a debit card is nothing but an electronic version of that check. So the moment you run a debit card, it's basically writing a check to the merchant, and the money comes up these days almost instantaneously out of your checking account from the host bank. So that's a debit card. So notice that when you run a debit card, your money comes off your checking account almost instantaneously. When you run a credit transaction, on the other hand, no money changes hands at that point. So just a credit occurs, and it's a credit transaction, and you're going to get a bill at the end of the month from your credit card company, and then you can either pay it off in full, in which case you don't incur any costs, or you can pay the minimum required, or you can pay somewhere in between, and then there's interest to be paid on the unpaid balance. So that's the difference between a credit card transaction and a debit card transaction. In a debit card, the money comes off right away. It's like writing a check. A credit card is a credit transaction. Nothing changes at the point of transaction. Simply you swipe the card, you sign. That's a promissory note. When you sign that little thing on the little pin pad, all you're doing is you're saying that I authorize this payment. That's all you're saying. Nothing, no money physically changes hands at that point. Okay, so let's say 2 days later you bring that money item back. So you buy something from Walmart for, let's say, $50. You use a debit card. In that case, $50 comes off your checking account right away. Or you do the same transaction with a credit card, in which case nothing happens. So 2 days later, if you bring that item back, in the credit card situation case, the company will simply do a reverse transaction and just credit out the debit, in which case you are, or debit out the credit. In other words, it goes back to zero, nothing changed, no harm, no foul. Whereas in a debit card, it's more problematic because the money has already physically come out of your account. It takes about a week to 10 days for the money to go back in. And that's one of the problems, one of the supposed disadvantages of using a debit card transaction is that if you return the item, it takes a while for the money to come back into your account. It's not instantaneous. Although the money coming out of your account is instantaneous, or thereabouts, the money going back in case you were to return the item, is not far from instantaneous. It takes a while. It takes a week or longer sometimes for that money to physically come back into your checking account. So that can be a problem. If you are on a tight budget and you need that money back in your account, you may not be so lucky. And so that's one of the disadvantages of a debit card transaction. Why do banks perform promotions like giving money back when credit cards are used? Yes, that's just to incentivize you so cashback is a good example. Visa, Discover is famous for that. They're the ones who started that movement now. American Express does it, and a host of other cards do it now. Yes, what they do is they charge. If you talk to merchants, they'll tell you that they hate Discover with the passion. And the reason is that Discover charges vendors the most, relatively speaking, for when people use their cards. And part of that excess money that they extract from stores, they use to give you cash back. So they give you 1% or 2% cash back on your transactions. That what Discover is doing, Discover is not paying it out of their pocket. They are forcing the merchants to pay more. And then out of that more, they are giving you a part back. So you are happy. You, the consumer, is happy. I am certainly happy. Discover is my first way of transaction, mode of transaction. But the merchants hate it, right? Because they have to pay more. And you'll see frequently a lot of merchants will refuse Discover card. That's one of the things that they won't accept. They accept Visa and everything else, but not Discover. They'll tell you, we don't take Discover. That's because it's very expensive for the merchants to authorize Discover transactions. How do you know what your credit score is? Simply look it up. You don't have to guess. You can just go you can go in and check. You have to pay for it. It's not free, but you can certainly look at the score if you need to. If one never uses credit card but cash for everything, how is it right that one could be punished? So it's a great question. If one never uses credit card but cash for everything, how is it right that one could be punished for not having a credit score while being responsible and paying for things when absolutely. That is one of the big, huge flaws in the system, is that we recognize if you have a lot of credit, then banks feel comfortable in giving you more credit. But if you have no credit, and you've been responsible and you've done everything with cash, guess what? You have no track record. And so there's no way for a credit card company to gauge how credit-worthy you are. That's the argument they use. It's a flawed argument, granted, but it's still an argument. It's the best argument they have, because their point is that if you don't have a track record of borrowing and paying back, then we have no way to judge how responsible you're going to be with loans. And therefore, we're not going to give you any money till you have proven. So it's like a catch-22 argument, right? Without the money, you have no way to prove your creditworthiness. And if you're not creditworthy, they're not going to get the money. So it sort of is a cyclical logic. So yes, that is, I fully agree. I've faced that when I was a student myself. So yes, you have my sympathies. There are ways around it, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, you can scroll around for 1 second.
Okay, okay, I'll take a few more. Credit Karma is completely free. Not that I'm advertising or anything. Okay. What is Credit Karma?
Credit score
it's
checking
website
site.
that
Oh, okay.
gives you all
Well,
information.
that'll show you how much I knew. Okay. If there are multiple users, it keeps shifting. If there are multiple users on a credit card, is it building all users' credit scores? Multiple users. I'm not even sure that you have multiple users of it. You cannot have, okay, you can have a family-based, like a lot of companies will issue a credit card, but they issue different cards to different members. So it's not the case that one credit card can be used with a specific number, at least not to my knowledge. If you know about this, bring it to my attention, I'll look into it. But based on what I know, you cannot have one card with a specific number issued to multiple people in the family. That doesn't happen. Different people get different cards from the same company, and it can be a family usage or whatever, but it's still tied to different people. Okay. No, not now. All right. Let's see. How well, I'm going to leave the student loans questions out right now. I've gotten that. Let's go back up on top. How do you know? Okay. If someone cosigns for a vehicle, how does that build credit for both people? I'm not even sure that it builds credit for both people. Cosigner is nothing but a guarantor. So when somebody cosigns for a loan, that's really somebody saying, so let's say you're trying to buy a car and your dad or your mother, whoever, a relative cosigns. So all that cosignee does is that he or she states or guarantees that you, the borrower, you're gonna pay. If you fail, then he or she will be responsible for your loan. That's all they're saying. So there's no credit building for that person. So if you do not pay or whatever, then the bank or the company, the credit company, is going to go after that cosigner, the person who's cosigned, for the money. So that's a big risk the person takes when people co-sign others' loans, is that you're putting yourself in harm's way in case something bad happens. Is having too much credit bad? Yes, it is. Too much credit means you may not be able to, you may be stretched. If you borrow too much and don't have enough income to support that, that's what gets people in trouble. That's what causes people to file for bankruptcy, right? And we'll talk about that as part of this segment. But that's extreme. That's what happens. If you have too much debt and then you don't have enough income to pay off your money, then you get in trouble by, and then eventually you have to file for bankruptcy. So yes, it is bad, very bad. Do I have to pay interest when I pay back the money to the bank? Yeah, they're not doing you a favor by giving you money. It's not fun and games for them. This is the way they earn money, right? Banks make income. So let me give you a quick banking education or a lesson in banking. How do banks operate? So banks have two ways that they bring money in and money. So money comes in through depositors. So in a bank, you have depositors who put money in through your checking. We have checking accounts and savings accounts in banks. We are depositors, right? So the bank has thousands of depositors. If it's a big national bank, it has millions of depositors putting in many millions or billions of dollars in deposits. The bank then uses that deposit fund to loan out money to borrowers like you and I. When we want money to buy a house, buy a car, buy whatever, loans, part of that deposit fund goes out, is loaned out by the bank for money, for interest income. And the difference between what the bank earns through lending out money versus what the bank has to pay out to depositors for putting money in, that difference in interest rate is what the bank earns. That's the profit, that the profit part of the bank. The bank's revenues come from that difference in interest rates. Okay? So that's how banks make money. So yes, if the bank's lending you money, they want their money back with interest. They're not doing you a big favor by lending you money and saying, oh yeah, just pay us back, don't worry about it. No, it doesn't work that way. They will be brutal. They'll try to collect it however they can, which is why in a mortgage loan situation, if you don't pay up, they'll just simply foreclose on the loan and force you out of the house and take the house back and sell it and recover their money. What happens if more people become borrowers than depositors? Does the bank fail? Well, banks have checks and balances in place. They have to maintain. There's all kinds of regulations about how much money they have to maintain and stuff. So those things don't happen because they make sure that there's enough money. They have to maintain it to maintain federal regulations and things like that. What's my favorite bank? I'm afraid I will plead the fifth on that. Let's see, we will go over different strategies. Yes, we will go over different strategies. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so you can handle the rest of the questions, I think. Credit should not be used for extending your lifestyle. So again, there is especially with credit card loans, again, given how interest rate sensitive those are, there's a common saying that you should not use a credit card for extending your lifestyle. So what does that mean? Well, if you eat out every day, you go to a fancy restaurant, you rack up, or you go to Jake's and before you know it, you've racked up like, $100 bill on a regular basis. Well, those are the easiest ways to get in trouble with credit, right? So it should not be used for extending your lifestyle, and that can cause you a lot of trouble. So historically, if you look at the data, we have been very bad at saving. In fact, we have almost made it an art form of living beyond our means. So, credit cards and a plethora of credit cards and easy ways to get credit have really fueled that kind of appetite in us over the last 2 decades. When you look back on the history of our savings behavior, we were one of the last countries in the world in terms of saving, because it's not somehow been in our psyche to save money. Now, last 4 years have been different, but that's driven by a whole different phenomenon and fear and anxiety. But normally, if you look at the data over a couple of decades, we are hugely in deficit in terms of money saved funds. So here's some stats. Bottom line is we are bad savings. We love credit. Okay, so household debt paradox. So there is this has been well studied by behavioral economists, that there is this household debt paradox that exists, and it's robust, almost like these these pyramid schemes that you continue to wonder why they happen, because they seem so obvious when people get caught and all that, but they continue to happen. So the household debt paradox has been a well-known paradox. And why is it a paradox? It's because there's this puzzling connection between credit card debt and liquid assets and no interest savings accounts coexisting at the same time. So somebody is in, family X is in $20,000 credit card debt, having huge troubles paying off because the interest rate is 40% on those on that credit card loan, but may have $20,000 or $25,000 savings sitting in a savings account in a bank, generating almost no interest, maybe 1% if you're lucky, but right now not even that. And so it's a paradox because they are coexisting at the same time, where common sense suggests that you should use one to pay off the other and thereby free yourself of this high interest debt. Yet that does not happen. And there are a variety of ways to explain it. It's behavioral mostly, because people feel anxious. A savings account is like a nest egg. People feel comfortable to see it there. Unfortunately, the rational side should argue that you're paying 40% interest rate and getting 1%, if at all, on the other side of the ledger. You're incurring a net cost of 39% per month on your credit card balance. And that's something that's hugely expensive just to satisfy a behavioral anxiety issue. So anyway, so that continues to exist. Try not to let that happen in your lives, and that's the lesson here. But it's been observed and reported in many different contexts. Okay, are all credit cards created equal? Of course not, when the question is phrased like that. And so you have these open accounts like Visa and MasterCard, and then, of course, the conventional low interest rate loans, bank loans that I talked to you about. And so it's in a way, we've already discussed this. This is the whole debate between collateralized loan versus non-collateralized loans. So I'm going to move on. Deadbeats and revolvers. So I kind of alluded to this earlier when I was talking about paying off debit transaction versus a credit transaction. So when you do a credit card transaction, you get a bill at the end of the month. And I'm sure all of you have gotten that bill and continue to get it every month. And then you have two choices, right? You can either pay off the entire balance at the end of the month by the due date, in which case you don't get charged anything. It's what they call free credit. And if you don't, if you pay anything less than the full amount, then you get charged, for the unpaid balance, you get charged a fairly substantial interest rate, which will show up in your next cycle, billing cycle, and so on and so forth. Well, credit card companies want you to do that. They don't want you to pay off the whole thing. Because when you pay off the whole thing, credit card companies make the least amount of money. They make very little money off of you. And so credit card companies don't like that, and they call those people names. So deadbeats refer to people who pay off their loans in full every month. That's the credit card insider terminology, to refer to people who pay off their bills every month. They're the deadbeats. And if you're not that, then you are called a revolver. You revolve your credit, which is good. All companies, credit card companies, want you to revolve your credit because that's how you make most money in your. That's how the banks make the most money off of you, through the interest rates they charge. So who are the deadbeats? From a demographic standpoint, the deadbeats are relatively older people. They're educated, generally from higher income families. Revolvers are mostly younger families and those with lower income. So I told you why they hate the deadbeats, because they make their monies off of the revolvers, people who revolve their credit. So what are lenders looking for? At the end of the day, when you go to a bank, when you approach a bank for money, there's only one thing that they want. Okay, they want to ascertain whether you can pay back the money with interest. That's all they care about. At the end of the day, there's nothing else that they want to know about you. All they want to figure out is whether you're going to pay back the money with interest. And so everything they do is in an effort to figure out your character. How have you behaved with loans in the past? And this is where the one question that came up earlier about not having a track record and then having a difficult time getting loans comes into play, is that if you do not have a track record, yes, you have been responsible and that's a great thing, but credit card companies or loan companies, before they give you money, have no way to gauge, yes, you've done well with cash, that's fine, and they will agree with that. But what they will take issue with is that they don't know how you're likely to behave in a schedule when you have to pay back money every month. And so that's why having a track record where you demonstrate that you've taken loans in the past and repaid them successfully and in time is a good signal that you're likely to repeat that behavior in the future. And therefore, that's what loan officers look for when they are doing a credit check. They're trying to figure out how likely are you to pay back the money with interest this time around. And that's all they care about. So how do they determine that you'll pay them back? What is the process? Well, they do a check. They do a credit check. That's essentially what they're doing. And a credit check is nothing but them looking at your behavior in the past. How have you done? Have you defaulted on payments before? Have you been late frequently in your credit card payments? Have you, do you have merchants who have filed, who have collection stuff filed against you? Those are the kind of things that they look for. And if there are too many of those in your record, those are red flags potentially for banks to deny you credit. Okay? So that's something you need to work on. If you think that your account has that kind of behavior, you need to clean that up before you apply to a bank, because you know for sure that the loan officers are going to see that. The moment you apply, they're going to run a credit check on you through the credit bureaus. So here are some of the things that they watch out for: credit accounts, student loan repayments, judgments against you by a court of law, bankruptcies, delinquencies, your address, employment history is an important metric for them. So they look for stability. How long have you lived in your current location, current residence? Do you own your property or you rent? If you keep moving around, if you have many different addresses over the last few years, that is a bad sign. That's a red flag to them. If your employment, they see a lot of jobs, a lot of new jobs, a lot of places you worked in over the last few years, that's a red flag, because those things all indicate lack of stability, i.e. it impacts on your ability to pay off the loan. And so those things go against you. Okay, let's try to take some more questions. Is there a way to stop getting hard checks when I'm not even applying? Absolutely. You can actually put a hold on your account. It's fairly easily done. You can go to any of the 3 credit bureaus, and we'll talk about that more when we get to that. But you can actually have a hold placed on the, and you're probably talking about the soft checks, not the hard checks, because the hard checks are the ones that you authorize. So there's a difference. Soft checks are checks that credit card companies or finance companies routinely do on accounts. They just it's algorithmic. They've written these codes. These are bots that go in and check for certain characteristics. If those are matched, then they isolate those names and send you prepaid requests or whatever, pre-approved loan invitation, credit card invitations and things like that. So those are called soft looks. So those haven't been precipitated by you. They haven't. They just do them. So if you put now hard checks are the ones where you fill out a form. So let's say you want to buy a car, you want to lease a car, or you want to finance a car. You go sit in the dealer's finance office and you fill out a form and you authorize a check, and that's when they go and check. That's a hard check. That's authorized by you. Now, what happens is you can put a hold on your account, you can put a lock on your account, which prevents anybody, hard or soft, to look into your account. Anybody. Okay, it puts just so if you are sure that you're not going to be doing any applications, credit applications anytime in the future or the near future, you can simply have a hold put on your account, which precludes anybody from looking into your account. Okay, and then when you are ready for a loan application or something, you can then you can go in and then allow access to your account. And you can do that online. It's pretty simple to do these days. So that's sort of the answer to that. I'm not sure about the military question. What about being in the military? I move around a lot. Would that affect my credit score? I don't think being in the military and moving around affects your credit scores, but I could be wrong. That's my guess. And I'm pretty sure of it, but won't stake my life on it. All right. What's with all of the ads these days about checking your credit score for free? Example, Credit Karma, free credit report. Okay, so I'm not sure. Maria, do you know anything about this credit score thing? So by law, you are allowed to look at all your credit history from the 3 credit bureaus, and we'll talk about those credit bureaus, once a year. Once a year, you're allowed to go in and check, and we actually have a link that we provide you. You should go and do that yourself. It's pretty easy to do if you haven't done so, and you can get it online almost instantaneously, and you can look through. Now, what it does do is give you all your past history, whether there are any adverse remarks against you by any vendor or any merchant, those kind of things. What it does not do for free is to give you a score. The score is not free. You do not get the score for free. You get all of your credit history, which goes into creating the score, but you don't get the actual score because the score is a trademark thing by this company, Fair Isaacs, that developed it with their resources, so they don't give that away for free. That's a highly secret algorithm as to how all of this gets mapped into a score. That's their proprietary algorithm that does it, and therefore you don't get that for free. Now, there are ways to get a free credit score without paying. Obviously, when it's free without paying. So let's say you apply for a credit card and you get denied. Then by law, you can go and look at your score. That allows you a free peek into your score, the fact that you were refused credit by a merchant. So those kind of things allow you. Then sometimes if you buy a subscription to something, they will allow you to look at your score. So there are backhanded ways of looking at the score, but normal way to check your score is you pay like $8 or $9 and you can look at your score anyway. But there are ways to bypass that if you don't want to pay that amount. With these particular websites, I'm not sure. Because there are new websites popping up all over every day pretty much. Okay, how are the 3 credit bureaus different from one another? They are different in the sense that they have different geographic coverages. So the 3 credit cards companies, the credit bureaus, have strengths in their coverage in different parts of the country. So they essentially cover the same things, but one company might be stronger in the Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest. The other company might be stronger, have a stronger presence in the East Coast, the one in the Midwest and South. And so what most companies, banks and all that do, is they look at all 3 scores and take the median score, the central score. So they will look at all 3 scores and take the central score as your representative score. It's called the median. All right, so here are the credit bureaus that we were talking about: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. And again, you can go on, log in, and you once a year. What's that link? We have that right on our website. Yeah. So you can click on that link, and you can go and get a free credit report for yourself. In fact, that's part of the exercise in this class anyway. So, okay. So, as I told you, that the exact formula for how all this credit-related information maps into a score, like 777. How does that go from all this information about your past history and behavior with loans and payments, how does that become a score, map into a number? That part is secret. It's not something we know. It's a closely guarded secret, okay? And with good reason. Why do you think so? I mean, you may argue, why shouldn't I know this? Why shouldn't I know the formula that's being used to calculate a number that may adversely impact my life? I have every right to know what the company is doing, right? That you can argue that, right? So what would the counter be to that argument? If somebody were to say, I deserve to know what mechanism, what formula, secret formula the company is using, FICO is using, Fair Isaacs is using to map this into a number, which we don't, but I have a right to know. What's the counter to that? The counter to that is you don't need to know, or you don't have a right to know, because if you did, if we knew how this mapping occurs, then we would game the system. We would know how to behave to get the score we want. How to behave, and that defeats the whole purpose of this exercise. Because the goal is not for us to pretend one way or another to get the score we want, but to be on our natural behavior and then have the score that we have. And therefore, telling us the super secret formula defeats the whole purpose of having the score to begin with, because it encourages gaming behavior on our parts. And that's not the purpose of the score. That's why score is never told to us. But we know what the components are, and which we'll discuss shortly, that go into the score. Therefore, we can modify our behavior through the broad characteristics, but we don't know the exact formula that's used. That's the secret part. But we know the components that go into it, which we'll discuss very, very soon here. Okay? So look at the stuff that goes into your credit card calculation. Well, maybe let's stop here. I want to talk about this in greater detail. So we'll stop. Any questions that I can address quickly? Okay, nothing that you can handle. Okay, so I'll see you